Hi, colleagues. It's my intention to share with you a series of videos to teach and explain and give context and information around each of the activities and events and games that go along with the vocabulary curriculum. And what you'll find from the very beginning of each vocabulary unit, as well as the beginning of each bend, is a time for our students to self-assess their knowledge of the words that they'll be learning. And the activity goes like this. You'll post the words. It's usually 5 per bend in this case. So for 5 words, you'll post for students without any context or definitions. And you'll ask them a simple question. How well do you think you know these words? Is this a word that you've maybe never seen before? You're not sure. Is this a word that you kind of know, maybe a little bit? And it's a word that you deeply know that you could teach. I'll often say, is this a word you could teach to somebody in a younger grade? And what you'll find is kids will reflect on that and they'll tend to do this. They'll tend to inflate their capabilities in their knowledge of the word. And that's why I say, how well do you think you know these words? Because I want to offer some flexibility and wiggle room, because oftentimes what I find is at the end of each bend, students will, if you pose this question again, how well or how much more deeply did you learn these words? You'll just see it on their faces. They'll be like, oh, wow. Yeah, I definitely know this word a lot more deeply. And so don't be afraid if you show kids a list of words and the whole class, like, yeah, we know these. And it may be true. But what they'll do is they'll be learning each of the words much more deeply so that they can use it in their speech, in their writing, and hopefully they can use it metaphorically. And it's okay, because human beings tend to inflate their capabilities anyway. And that's just a very human thing. I often joke, most people think they're above average at something, right? But that's mathematically impossible for most people to be above average at something. And like I said, when kids reflect on their knowledge of the words, they realize that they're like, wow, I learned these words much more deeply than I thought. And where does this come from? This idea of knowledge of words. Well, let me show you. This idea that words can be learned at a deeper level is a framework that's been created and developed by many researchers. You can see Dale, Beck, and her colleagues, and Graves. And here's my synthesis of this framework. Because when you read widely, you learn a breadth of words. You learn a lot of different words, but you might learn them at a kind of a shallow level. When you learn individual words, even if it's just a few individual words, you can learn them much more deeply. And learning words at a deep level helps you store those words in the long-term memory so that you can connect them to other words that you're learning. Because the paradox of knowledge is the more you know, the more you're able to learn. So reading widely and reading a lot is important to get that breadth of words, because kids can learn more words than we could possibly teach them. But learning words deeply is also important as well. They really balance each and complement each other in vocabulary acquisition. So this framework is just a way to think about depth of word knowledge. And it starts with, at the lowest level, thinking, I've never seen this word before. I'm not sure what it means. Then there's sort of a general knowledge where I know this word means something positive or negative, or I know this word belongs in science or social studies, but you're not exactly sure what it precisely means. And then there is the individual context, which means I know this word, I know what it means, but I only know it in the context in which I learned it, maybe in this part of a story or in this book or in this subject. And then, of course, you have a deeper level, which is where you're able to start explaining what the word means. You can transfer it to your speech and to your writing, and you can apply it and understand it and see it in different areas and different domains of your life. And then the deepest level is considered generally to be someone who can compare and contrast two different words, but can also use them, if possible, in a figurative or metaphorical sense. Not every word, I don't think, can be used figuratively, but many can. And this also connects with all the vocabulary experts I've read say more poetry, more poetry, more poetry, more poetry, because what they do is they immerse and expose kids to a lot of fresh, new ways, figurative ways that words are used, and oftentimes rare words that aren't often used. And so incorporating poetry into our practice, according to the vocabulary experts, is key. So when you conduct this activity to begin day one, what you usually do is you post the words, you invite kids to turn and talk, listen to their conversations, and just take note. It's just a very informal low stakes self-assessment. But I think it's also key. It's not written in the vocabulary curriculum, but I think it's key on one of the last days of the bend to get kids to reflect on what words they've learned much more deeply, and why. And usually at the end of this days of activity, usually introduce one of the words, because it's kind of a brief activity just to ask kids to self-assess. And so the next video, I'm going to explain the introduction of words and the example, non-example activity that goes along with them. Hope you found this video helpful in your exploring the vocabulary curriculum, and stay tuned for the next episode.